Okay, in this video, we're going to extend upon our string methods. In the last video, we worked with equals ignore case. Now, sometimes it's useful to know if strings are greater than or less than another string. What does that mean? Well, in the case of letters, we would say that C is greater than A because it comes after it in the alphabet, or, dog is greater than cat because it starts with a D instead of a C, or we would say that car is less than cat because the CA's match, but then R comes before T in the alphabet. So it's useful to know these things, especially when you're sorting lists of words. So the method we're going to use for this is compareTo. And here's the way compareTo works, right? compareTo, if I pass it either another string or just type this string in, it's going to return different values based on which string is greater than the other. So there's three things that can happen with a compareTo. It could be equal to 0. If it's equal to 0, then the two strings are actually equal, right? They're the same strings, right? Or it actually, and so I don't have to do the compareTo. I'm going to have a variable int value, right? And I'm going to make that s1.compareTo s2, so I don't have to keep typing that over. Okay, so if the value that gets returned is 0, then string 1 and string 2 are the same, right? They're the same. If you get a positive value back, then the first string, the S1 in our case, is greater than S2. So I could say else if value is greater than 0, right, a positive number, then I could say S1 is greater than S2, right? And then the only other thing that can happen, so I don't need to say else if value is less than 0, the only other thing that can happen is when it's less than 0, right? So in this case, right, I'll just put a comment here, value is less than 0. Then we know that string 1 is less than string 2, or it comes before it in the alphabet. So let's think about these strings. So clearly they're not equal. Let's run this code, right? So in this case, it's telling us that string 1 is greater than string 2 because string 1 comes after it in the alphabet, right? R comes after B, right? So if I had a car and I had bus, then car would be greater than bus, right? So it would say car S1 is greater than S2. And we could have made this nicer. We could have actually printed out the string. Well, let's do that, right? So I could put, S1 is greater than S2, right? And over here I could do the same thing. S1, so we'll actually see the strings, right? Is greater than S2, right? Okay, so now when I run the code, right, it says car is greater than bus. If I made the first string, apple, then apple is not greater than bus. It comes before bus, right? So apple is less than bus. If I made both the strings the same, right, apple and apple, right, then it's going to tell me that the strings are equal, right? So compareTo is a very useful tool. So because some people say, oh, I'll just compare the first letter. Well, what if the first letters are the same? Then they'll say, oh, I'll compare the first and the second. Okay, what if this one is apple is apply, right? And this one's apple. You're going to have to compare all these letters until you find one that's different. Could you do that? Sure you could. You could create a loop and you could go through and you could see, but it's easier to use compareTo. So now which of these strings would be greater than the other? Well, all the first 4 letters are the same, so then the question is Y greater than or less than E, right? And Y is greater than E, so apply is greater than apple. So again, that's the way we use the compareTo function, very useful. You can also print out the values of that get returned, but for most cases you only care if it's equal to 0, which means they're equal. If it's greater than 0, which means this string, whichever string you're doing here, is greater than the second string, which is in parentheses. Or if it's less than 0, then the first string you're using is actually less than or comes before S2 in the alphabet.